Did you just call me a moron? Oh, all right. Have you ever been in one of those positions where you said something, felt something, and did something in some way where you wished you could disappear? You wished the floor would open up and swallow you up and you could just end it right there. Well, let's talk about that.
Welcome, friends. We're glad that you're here. I'm Sylvia.
And I'm Shane.
We are here sharing the things that we have learned in our spiritual community and our bigger way of understanding the gospel, the way that we have come to see the gospel and the impact that it's had on our lives.
Yeah.
So we're glad that you've joined us.
That's right. So, gospel. What does that mean? God's story. We want to just lay that out there. What's God's story in our lives? So we're talking all about that. So there was in our spiritual community, we had a gathering a couple weeks, a week ago. I don't know when this was.
Oh my goodness,
It was somewhat recently. No, I don't know. She knows more than I do. I don't know.
A few months ago, probably.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's a very long week. I don't know about you, but it's been a very hot week here in Nebraska.
And evidently your time is flying by.
And my time has been flying by. That's correct.
This was a few months ago.
Yep.
A couple months ago at least.
Okay, go.
Yeah.
I like this.
So we had a large gathering upstairs here, actually. And
it was here?
It was here.
Man, I don't even remember this.
It was here. And we had a lot of people, and I want to say this youngster that we're telling the story about was maybe up on the stairs. I don't know. We were having a conversation, and as I recall, something came flying through the room.
Oh. Is that what happened?
And knocked something over.
Okay, vaguely. I'm remembering this. Yep,
Might have even been grape juice. We were having communion that day, so may have been. So something came flying through the room.
Yep.
Things went flying.
Yep.
And the youngster then wanted the floor to open up and
probably got reprimanded.
And got reprimanded.
Got reprimanded immediately, as we would do as good parents, right? That's what. No. Okay. Yes. Well, she said yes, so we're going with it. So got reprimanded. Yep.
And felt really bad, and the floor didn't open up, so he made his own little hiding place.
Yes.
And he went down between the couches and was hiding. And you came over to him and started talking to him, and you said, "Hey, I want you to know that you don't have to hide." Yep, you did that. Yep, we don't want to do that. Yep. But you don't have to hide. And you want to tell them why it doesn't have to hide?
Yeah, you don't have to feel ashamed of what you did. Maybe accept the consequences. There's going to be consequences, but you don't have to be ashamed of what you did. Ultimately, the reality that we're living in as those that are on journey with God's story is the idea that Jesus has already paid for the penalty. He's already paid the penalty of all of our misdeeds and however you want to call it, all of our unintentional, all of the brokenness. He's already paid that. We don't have to be ashamed of that. So it was just a moment just to try to help him to see and to understand that there doesn't need to be shame. You can feel guilty because I think guilt can have its purpose. Because that's when we realize that there's something wrong. But shame, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I cannot think of a good reason to have shame. Any beneficial, I mean. I can't think of anything beneficial
of having shame. Yeah.
And so we were talking about that story, and it struck me that we do that as adults. Right. Like we have moments where we want to hide. We want to kind of bury ourselves. We feel this immense blanket of shame come over for some of the things
Whatever.
that we've said, done, haven't done, whatever it is. And when we replayed that incident upstairs, I thought about how that's one of the things that we've been doing as a community for the last 3 years is trying to help each other out in realizing that we don't have to have that shame. And that what that is can be defined as part of discipleship. I mean, we talked about this last week. Discipleship is helping move from unbelief to belief in every area of your life. And those unbeliefs are unbelief about, God, unbelief about who you are, unbelief about the good news of God's grace. And that's just one of the instances of that I know of that we try to regularly speak into.
And it's sometimes easier with kids because whatever they're believing, they will just show right out. As adults, sometimes we filter ourselves, we stuff things, we know that we shouldn't. we show it in certain kinds of behavior, the way we can act out or try to mask it. So it's sometimes more difficult with adults to really recognize where someone is hurting and they have another option that they're just not able to see right now. But that the gospel gives them another way that they can approach life. And that's true of each one of us, all of us.
So here's audience participation time. Thanks for watching. We'd love for you to, in a short way, share a time when someone shared good news to you. Someone was able to speak some good news about your situation in life, about how you felt or what was going on. That was good news. That lifted up your shoulders. That relieved a burden. That gave you a better picture of who God is and who you are in that. Because that was discipleship.
Right. And what I always come back to this so much. The gospel story is good news, and Jesus is the hero. So it might be good news that I can try harder and do better. Maybe, maybe not.
So like next time, Sylvia, I know you can do better at this.
Control yourself and you'll do it better. So maybe that's good news if I'm a strong-willed person, but it's not. Jesus is not the hero, so it's not actually gospel. So that's how I real easily go, man, is this gospel truth? Capital T, truth. And if it is, then those two things are going to be true.
So we wanted to take this week. Last week we talked about kind of what gospel is. We wanted to take this week to talk about what it looks like in community, how it's lived out. And so I have this list and you have your list, and let's kind of compare lists to this, what it looks like to live out. And I have already given away the first one.
I know, you said it.
So I'm just going to take it and let you kind of pick up the pieces. So discipleship, not gospel, I'm sorry, discipleship, what discipleship is. Discipleship happens in community. This is what it looks like. Discipleship is not a one-on-one. It is a one-on-one. It's not a Bible study. Discipleship has to happen in community. You can't just do discipleship with your morning devotions, if you have morning devotions, or if you go to a worship service. Those are good things. I'm not saying those aren't good things. Those are good parts of your life and your spiritual journey and growth. But discipleship has to happen in community, because it's only in community that we get that bigger sense of what it means to live out. And let's face it, none of us are, very few of us are really that fluent in gospel, that it takes a village to kind of disciple each other. You may have an idea, and Ryan may have an idea, and I may have an idea, and together we can piece together a beautiful mosaic of what it means to follow this God. So that's one of the first things that we found, that discipleship has to happen in community. And I'm not talking about a congregation. I'm not talking about church membership. I'm talking about community. And you can have community in that congregation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can have a smaller team, a smaller group of people that you invest life in that. But community, while it needs to be more than one, it's not really
can't be
great.
500.
Yeah, it can't be 500. So
No.
so that's one of the first ones, and we'll continue to play this out. Go, what you got?
Well, I was just going to add to that. It's a very logical reason why it has to be in community, because if you're struggling with unbelief, the problem is you can't see it.
Yeah.
That's why you're struggling, because you can't see it. So spending more time with yourself isn't the solution.
Yep.
Spending it with other people.
Yep.
So discipleship is, like you said, it's not a Bible study. It's not having a theological, doctrinal layout.
Mm-hmm.
It is believing God day in, day out. So it happens in stuff. It happens in, where's the money coming from this month? Or it happens in, man, how do I manage this difficult relationship? It happens in stuff that happens in your life. Because if all God does is give you this box up here with beliefs that you put up there every week and pull out every weekend and look at and go, yeah, I believe that, and then put it away, that's not the life that he called us to.
No. There's not going to be a lot of change and movement.
Yeah, he called people to follow him day in, day out, and he calls us to the same thing. So discipleship is understanding more of who he is in everyday stuff. Yeah. So in the hard stuff of life, the gospel should speak to that. Or what use is it?
Yeah, which I want to take that and actually go backward to this idea of community is not a group of 500 people, because the things that you just mentioned about hard relationships, about finances, about how we parent our kids, or what we do with our aging parents. How we interact with our boss and the aspirations that we have. Those are things that are a little too vulnerable. We feel a little too vulnerable to share to a big crowd. So it's not going to happen, with your Sunday Sabbath best on in the foyer of your church. It's probably really not going to happen there. You need a community of people that have created a place that is able to hold where you are, hold your feelings, and honor your and respect your. I don't want to say privacy. It's not the word I'm looking for. Your story, where they can honor your story and you can feel safe to be there and to share it. So that every day. And so now I'm going to leap forward and take my third one.
All right.
And my third one is this idea that if gospel is done in community and it's done in the everyday, then there is a verse that maybe some of you that have been following Jesus for a while have heard in the end of Matthew, that last chapter, that Jesus says, go and make disciples. And many that are in Christianity feel like that's like one of the greatest things that he gave us and told us to do, that's what we're to be about. As a God family is about making disciples, and so that's discipleship. So that should be our number one thing. That it's not about getting the best degree. It's not about getting the best job. It's not about any of that things that we kind of talked about. The American dream. It has nothing to do with that. Yeah. Instead, discipleship should be something that we adjust our life around, not we adjust discipleship around our lives. That should be like the main thing. And so what that looks like for myself, and I can speak a little bit to where my wife is as well, is our lives are about that every day. Like we have something going on every day, and it's giving into this community. And like you mentioned before, I think it was last week where you said, I spend a lot of time with these people. Yeah. Because we do. And that's not because we're trying to insulate ourselves and we have this bubble away from the rest of the world, but we have these are the people that we're discipling in our community.
That's how you get to know
Yes.
and understand where someone is at and how to speak into their life is by spending time with them and investing
and
yourself
it's
in them.
it's in the everyday stuff. I don't know if we mentioned the rhythms of life. But it's in the eating and the celebration. It's in the resting. It's in the worship. It's in
the playing.
Yeah, it's in all of that. So, like my wife and I host a family dinner night where we have a couple come over and we just have dinner every Tuesday. It's just there. We just hang out. We eat. We find time to talk because discipleship rarely can happen just like on cue and on demand.
Yeah. That it's not a set of questions that you bring and a set of answers that someone else gives.
Yeah.
It is about hanging out and just getting to know someone until something comes up that needs the gospel spoken into it. So
sometimes that happens in the living room. Sometimes that happens at Costco. When you invite people to go with you to Costco, or let's go to the park, let's go walk our dogs. What do we have in common that we can go and do? All of those things. But again, my third point was that discipleship, you adjust your life around that. And that may sound like, that sounds like a lot of church.
It's
And I only want to say,
not a lot of church.
Unless your idea of church is
sitting
just
in a row.
when people,
Yeah.
So it's a completely different experience than just sitting in the pew or going to church for however long you have to do.
Amen.
I don't know if you caught that, but the audience is in full agreement.
That's right. So yeah, okay, so that's mine.
It's not an event.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not something that we go to.
Yep.
It is life.
That's my number 4. What do you
I know.
Take that one. Go.
Got it.
Go with it.
So because it is a part of everyday life, it's not something that you schedule, it's not something that you go do. It's just how life is.
Yeah.
It's not a program.
Yeah.
It's not a program, it's not a study book,
You can use those in it.
Sure.
You can use studies as part of that. Another thing that my wife and I do, we host a Monday night Bible study. We're not the leaders of it. Just someone wanted to do. Hey, I want to have a Bible study. I want to open up the Word with some people, and can I have it at your place? Okay. That's discipleship for us, and it's not the study that's discipleship. It's the investing in this person's life and allowing them, the resources to be able to lead and to grow in however they can in that role. That's discipleship in our mind. Okay, we'll do that. We'll open up our home for you to come in and do that. So that's part of it. Okay, you got anything else? What else you got?
Well, then we got into this order of the B's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So with discipleship, life on life, things are kind of upside down. Because when you think of evangelism in a typical church setting, which we often think, that's Christian. That's how Christians do it, whatever that is. We try and convince people, so we want them to believe as we believe.
Yep.
And once they believe as we believe, then we expect that they will behave as we behave.
Yep.
And once they have done those things, then they belong.
Yes.
That's the general order. So tell us about discipleship. How does discipleship flip that upside down?
Well, I think it's interesting that discipleship doesn't require belief. Discipleship can be pre-belief.
So when you told the young child, you don't have to hide. Jesus has already paid for that. No one asked, hey, do you believe this? You're sharing good news, whether they choose to believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's still good news. And we still hold it to be true, whether they hold it to be true or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they hold it to be true.
It's still true, right? So it can happen, discipleship can happen with your atheist neighbors, with people that you know, that you hang out with, that you share life with, that don't necessarily, maybe they're yeah, they're not yet believers. And that's a pretty cool thing, because it doesn't have to happen before, or I'm sorry, it doesn't have to happen until belief is expressed. It can happen before that, because what discipleship shares, first of all, is you belong. That's one of the greatest first truths that we have fell in love with. Is this idea from the beginning of time, whenever that was. I don't even know when that was. I can't even count that far back. Yeah. God said that you belong. You are mine. I've created you for a purpose. I'm crazy about you. I want to participate in your life, and I want to collaborate with you in this journey that you're on.
Before you've done anything.
Yeah, before you've done anything. You don't have to impress me. So that great thing about discipleship is you can incorporate anyone into that and let them know that they belong. And as they hang out with you, they can see how you live and how you behave. And then at some point, they might not, but they might believe how you believe as well. So it flips it all the way around. Instead of maybe your faith tradition did this, it was believe these things, behave these things, and then we know you'll belong.
And then you're in.
Yep. We're saying discipleship can go the other way.
Yep, you're in. Come join us. Be a part.
And so I just wanted to say hi to Keith. Glad you're watching. Thanks for coming. So we've talked about discipleship requiring community, discipleship being about the everyday, and we've said it, or we've mentioned it, but maybe we need to say it specifically. It is life on life. This is about, just so you understand what that means we have to spend time together. We also said that discipleship requires, for it to really flourish, it requires that we adjust our life around it. And so if we may be in a season where, we have to say no to some things, because that's not, I only have a certain amount of time, so my priority is going to be this, and this, and gospel and discipleship are there. I may have to say no for a season to this other thing that I'd really like to do, and that may be a good thing. But that's not where we're at right now. And then we talked about how it's not an event, but it's a way of life. It can happen before belief is expressed. And I want to make sure this, I have it as number 6, this idea that discipleship revolves around gospel. And you mentioned it.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure we land on that for just a little bit. Discipleship revolves around gospel. It's not about a set of beliefs. It's not a Bible study. It's not, that kind of, like you said, doctrine. Please understand that discipleship is about gospel, and gospel is God's story of good news, the good news of God's story. And there's a really simple way that we've come to understand how to express that and how to learn that, what that good news is. And it's in those 4 questions that we talked about.
So we did this for quite a while in our weekly gatherings, going through these 4 questions, looking at the Bible and answering these 4 questions. And the questions are, first question is, what is God's character? So either thinking back on a story of the Bible or reading a story, being involved with that, something, studying nature. First question, what is God's character?
Yep. So who is God?
Who is he?
Yeah.
And the next question is closely linked to that and can't be separated from that, otherwise you're just making stuff up.
Yep.
So the second question is, how do we know that? What did we see that he has done in the story, in our lives? What have we seen that helps us understand who God is?
Yep.
So that we know that we're on track and we're not just wishing or making it up.
Okay, so who is God? What has he done? And then the third one?
And then in light of that, what is my identity? And what we oftentimes have done, I have done this, study groups I've been in have done this. It's just like, so you get done reading a story and you say, so who am I in the story? And we want to play a part in that actual story. But the question isn't, who am I in this story that we just read? But in light of who God is,
Yes.
and what he's done, what is now true about me? And this is where it begins to impact everyday life.
Yeah.
It's like, what is true about me is not a doctrinal, esoterical, out there question.
It's big words.
I know.
Man.
The
doctor's in the house.
It's a question of what is true about me in my everyday life.
Yeah.
And then the next question is very closely tied to that. How does that impact my life? How can I live differently? Mm-hmm. And now it isn't a requirement.
How do I get to live?
Yeah, now it's wow, I have freedom in Christ.
Yes.
Because of who he is, because of what he's done. I have freedom. I don't have to, and that's where we got into the 4 G's. I mean, it all makes a big loop.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
because God is good, I don't have to.
That's right.
And it's coming up with our own thing, because they don't all start with G.
True.
So it's coming up with our own. Like, what is today's message? And what I find so interesting is, time and again, a group will get together, study something, and it speaks to me in my situation. So what I see of being true of God is not the same answer that you come up with.
Yeah.
Both totally grounded in the Bible, but it speaks to where you're at in your life.
Yeah.
It really
impacts.
So
give me an example, non-Bible study example of what you just did, as you just expressed, because those sound like great Bible study questions, but I don't know about you guys. You could raise your hand if you do this. No one's going to know because we're online. But I don't know about you guys, but my week is not filled with Bible studies. Like, I'm not just having a Bible study all week. So if this discipleship happens in community, in the everyday, and has to do with gospel, then how does that play out in the everyday?
Okay.
Just real quick, because we
put me on the spot.
I did.
Too.
I'm sorry.
So it happens in conversations where it's usually revolving around worry, anxiety, and people feeling like the world is on their shoulders and theirs alone.
Sure.
And it involves asking questions. First off, what is it that you are feeling is weighing you down so much? Is that something that is really your responsibility?
Sure.
Is God big enough to handle that? How do we know he's big enough to handle that? What has he done? And if we know that he's big enough to handle that, then what is true about your situation? Can you rest in him? Can you let him handle it?
Yeah.
How do you get to live? You get to live without that burden. You get to live a more peace-filled life.
Yeah.
So here's you have to know the situation before you can speak gospel into it.
And so I love how you ended that, because if we were discussing a problem that we have, you would kind of walk me through, hey, let's remember you're reminding me who our God is. You're reminding me what he's done so that I can get a better understanding of who I am. And then you're giving me a vision of how I can live differently. Not you're giving me some advice that says, well, here's the list you need to do.
And then you'll feel better.
Yes, and then you'll feel better. Or here's a list you just need to do because this is the way God's law is. And those things might be true, but they're not going to be good news to that situation.
Right.
But you projecting, giving me a vision of how I could live in light of this amazing God that we have, man, that is smack dab good news.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't happen.
And it doesn't make you the hero either. It is a gift that God gave to you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it gospel.
Yeah.
It's not you working hard. It's living out the reality that God has already given.
Yeah. And that's not something that happens every time we get together. Every time that we're hanging out with someone, we don't always have this opportunity to do this. But because we hang out so often together, we can pick up on these times when there are things that are kind of going in a certain way that we would love to be able to speak some good news into. And in a future episode, we will probably go through what we have come to understand is the fruit to root to fruit process. So it's going to get a little fruity around here. Kind of excited about that.
Yep.
Okay, so we've been talking for, way too long without asking for any questions that you might have, any interaction.
Keith had a comment.
What are our questions or comments, or did you have time to read it? Did you read it?
It was
sort of.
It was about being around other people and realizing a different.
Sometimes it's just an awareness that there are other people around who are tuned into God in their own way.
So maybe everyone heard that. Of course, everyone else can see it.
Yeah, that's true. You guys can read the comments. I don't know why you're expecting me to be able to know these. I don't have a computer screen in front of me. So sometimes just being aware of
being around other people who
have a different awareness of
can see God a different way. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But do you have any other questions that pertain to some of the things that we have said? One of the things we were talking about doing actually next week is kind of playing that out and looking at what those 4 questions would look like, at least in the setting. In the setting of a conversation, not rehearsed, but a little bit prepared. So we'll see how that goes. So there are people in my workplace who are Christian in the way that they treat people. You know, I love the fact that God is so big that He can leave breadcrumbs of His presence anywhere, anytime, in any religion, in anyone's life.
Even the atheist who says they don't believe, but who are following God's
some of those principles, and you know that I believe that we just have a big enough God that He's not limited to just Christians. In fact, I think sometimes it's the Christians that push Him way more than others. But I think that's great that you can recognize that, hey, we have, truth is truth. Mm-hmm. No matter where it's found. If it's going to be truth, it's going to be truth in any setting, in any person. So, any other questions, comments? You can go ahead and leave them in there, and we will try to address them throughout the week. Again, if you have any particular topics that you'd like us to talk about, we're just going to keep rambling through some of the things that we have found really beneficial. And you may have noticed that a lot of these aren't like the practical, hey, how do you do this house church thing that you guys do? You haven't ever asked that, but we might at some point. But we definitely don't want to just say, hey, this is how it is. We would rather give you some broader principles that can apply whatever you're setting, wherever you are, that we're hoping are really good news. Yeah. There's some good stuff. You got anything else?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to share a resource. The book is Gospel Fluency by Jeff Vanderstelt. This book really goes into, a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about how the gospel impacts the everyday stuff of life, how it is that it influences who I am, and not just a set of beliefs. So, I've really appreciated this book. Speaking the truths of Jesus into the everyday stuff of life.
Awesome, which is kind of what we talked about.
Yep.
I guess Keith wrote one more question. Hey, thanks, Keith, for the dialogue back and forth, as much as you can call this dialogue. What text are you basing this discussion on? I'm going to say that we don't really have a text for this one. Other than the Matthew, I think it's 28, whatever.
Yeah, we talked before the camera comes on.
A little bit.
And we had talked about how, Jesus called people in His life. He said, hey, come follow me.
Yeah.
And He spent time going to He spent time with people. That's what He did.
Yeah.
He invited people to come, and He went to people. And He was teaching them along the roads. He was teaching them at parties. He was teaching them at funerals. He was teaching them at weddings, celebrations, everywhere.
Yeah, in the fields, in the cities. I mean, so it's not a text.
It was,
but
what did he do?
Yeah, it's just how we have.
How did Jesus live his life?
Yeah, the example that he gave, and not just Jesus, but also the disciples that followed and how they lived, and how Paul would bring someone alongside him, Timothy and Silas, and there were a couple others that were his traveling companions, and he would invest in their lives and then send them out, and so it's kind of just taking off of that idea and that process.
Stories.
Yeah, that general story of Scripture. So we don't have a specific discipleship. So, all right. Okay. So we need to finish because you guys have been watching us for way too long. So can I close?
Please.
Okay.
Go.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you liked what you saw, we would love for you to be willing to share this. There is a share button, I'm assuming, underneath. I've shared our things before. Like our Facebook page here so that you can know when we have any updates or any new things coming up. And please continue to express yourself in the comments and in the posts. We'd love to be able to interact with you. We'll see you again next week, Friday. Almost said something else. Friday, 7 o'clock Central. So thanks so much. Have a great day.
Good night.